What would you say to them, because selectmen is not a single issue position, what would you say to them that would change that thought?
I think I would say exactly that. A selectman is not a single issue position. And I took my job, I was on the elementary school building committee for 2 years. I took that very seriously, and I think that when you're on a particular committee in town, your job is to be an advocate for that committee. What I would take very, very seriously as a selectman is that my job is to advocate and balance the needs of everyone in town. It's a different job. I would approach it differently, and I would do what the people have mandated me to do as selectman, which is to look at all the needs across the town and balance them, and I take that very seriously.
Does anyone have a question in the audience?
I'd like to ask the question as to what the changes in the world that have been brought about by September 11th, how they might impact the affairs of the town, specifically as addressed by the Board of Selectmen. I'm particularly thinking of the anthrax problems that we had, and we believe it was in conjunction with September 11th, where people are saying, well, we are very fortunate that the attack was very limited, because if it had a broad attack, then that would have grossly exceeded our capability of dealing with it. So I'm asking, is there some excess capacity that we need to build into our emergency response systems in order to be able to deal with the new world as it exists now?
Good question.
That is a very important question, and I had met with the fire chief recently and asked him just that. And you know, I think that the town, for a town of this size, is probably as prepared as any other town. Is that enough? Probably not. I think, there have been recently reports in the Boston media that most towns' emergency response plans aren't up to par. I think that to the extent, is there excess capacity? Unfortunately, in the budget, there's not much excess capacity for anything. But I do think that's an important thing to look at what we can do to get the most bang for our buck in terms of, you know, what incremental steps we can take to prepare for, should there be an unfortunate, you know, incidents with anthrax or some other sort of attack in North Reading, what incremental steps we can take to be prepared to respond to that. To also, I think, look at the police facility, and one thing that I think that should be taken into account when that's built in, if it's built in the center or elsewhere, that the police and fire right now are in one building in town. Should there be a problem with both systems being incapacitated at one time, and how that could be separated. If the police station is built in the center of town next to the fire station, what redundancies we need in place either somewhere else, or what things electronically could be separated, or does it need to be in a different place to help address that? But like I said, I talked to the fire chief about that. I think we're as prepared as anyone else, which is probably not prepared enough, and it is something that we should focus on, and that the select board should probably take a lead role in finding out our emergency preparedness and see what we could do incrementally to improve that.
Good. Another question?
Since you gave me the segue regarding the police facility, do you feel that the facility, the current facility that has been proposed, can be built for less than $6.2 million now? Where are you on that issue? And what changes would you recommend? How do you think the Board of Selectmen should proceed in terms of solving the problem?
The police station is definitely, I think, one of the thornier issues. Can it be built for less than $6.2 million? Maybe very slightly. I do not think that it can be built for $4.8 million. I've sat in on many of those meetings, and in joint meetings between the Police Building Committee and the Board of Selectmen. I've listened to the officers themselves. $4.8 million will not buy us a police station that will last us for the next 30 years. To build it and then nickel and dime voters improving it over the next several years is not the way to go. It's not an honest way to go. So I would support building a full turnkey operation. Where we go from that, I think, again, that's an education process with voters at town meeting. It was said at the most recent town meeting where the vote failed to appropriate the additional dollars by just a very few votes. I think it was about 9 votes. The actual cost to the tax rate would have been less at 6.2 million because the percentage rate, the interest rate on bonds have fallen so far. It would have been, I think, about $90 a year on a $300,000 home, when it would have been probably close to $150 a year when the 4.8 million was approved. When I went to town meeting, that was the first time I, as a voter, had heard that. I think that's a communication issue where we need to, if we had communicated that to voters earlier, there might have been some people who didn't even attend town meeting who came out specifically to vote to buy more for less money. So I think we need to do that. Overall, though, and especially taking into consideration the Historic District Commission's view on that, what I would say is we now need to see where the elementary school issue is going to come out, and if the batch is going to be reused as a school, we probably again need to make another try to put the station in the center of town and to work with the Historic District Commission and to work with voters in adopting a budget that will get us the station we need. If the batch is not going to be reused as a school, we should maybe perhaps re-explore using that building to meet some of our public safety needs.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that?
Oh, you have a follow-up?
Are we a proponent of bringing that forward to town meeting for this spring, for April town meeting? Revisiting the police station again, even though we may not have a solution, or the elementary school building committee may not at that point be ready to go forward with what their future plans are. Do you feel like we need to get this issue resolved, or would you be a proponent of waiting?
I have been through the police station, and I do understand that it's woefully inadequate and that time is of the essence. However, if the elementary school building committee does not have a direct recommendation in April that we can go with, I think I would like to wait till October town meeting to look at that, probably not longer than that, but to wait till that shakes out. And again, it's all part of planning and making sure we know how the dominoes are going to fall and what's going to be the sensible plan overall.
Thank you.
Right. We'd like to know what are some of the ideas you would like to pursue if you were elected selectman. I mean, everyone's talking budget, there's this building issues, and what other ideas would you see that you would like to pursue or try to see get implemented or approved?
Aside from, as I alluded to, I think exploring how to grow our commercial tax base, that would be something that I would like to spearhead and look at very closely, because we need to focus on the revenue side of our budget and what flexibility we have there, as well as the expense. I'd also like to focus on, as we embark on some building projects, how we can manage tax bills for those who need help with them. We have the abatement program for seniors. I think that perhaps abatement programs should look at income levels overall. It's not only seniors who may find it unaffordable or have difficulty affording their tax bills in North Reading. It's other people on low income. And I would like to look at how we can perhaps expand that program and other things to relieve people who need relief to stay in the community that they love. So I think aside from the obvious issues, the budget, the schools, the police, growing the commercial tax base and helping with the affordability for the people that need that help would be issues that I would look to specifically.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr.
I'd like to ask the same question I asked of Jim Bagan earlier. We all know how demanding public service is in the town, and you've been active in the town and know how demanding that can be. In fact, at least from the paper, that was probably an issue when you stepped down from the elementary school building committee. It was a time issue, at least it was reported that way in the paper. I don't know any of the details. Do you feel now that you have the ability to make the commitment to this position would probably be more demanding than the ones that, than let's say, the school committee? You got the time to juggle everything that's going on in probably an active life and a demanding commitment to the selectmen, board of selectmen.
I took the time commitment very seriously when I made the decision to run for selectman, and I wouldn't have made that decision if I felt that I couldn't give the time necessary. I think that I can balance my personal life, and I would look at this as my professional life, like we all balance and we all prioritize, and this is very important and will be a top priority for me. The elementary school building committee, which I was a member of for several years at its height, was often 4 nights a week going out to meetings, and when those were important, I was there. I'm extremely organized, and I think able to balance all the different facets of my life and work on that together. My family is extremely supportive of me doing this. They feel that it's something that's important that we all can do for North Reading. My entire family supporting me, supporting North Reading. So I really don't see that to be an issue at all.
We talked briefly, you mentioned budget, so let's get into the budget a little bit. It's going to be a very difficult year for the budget of the town. There's not enough money to pay for everything that everybody would like to see. Some things are probably going to have to be cut or reduced. So the question to you is, what are the ideas that you have to deal with the budget crisis in specifics?
That is obviously, I think, going to be an issue that's perhaps even tougher than some of the immediate building needs. I think that what we need to look at, this is going to be a tough year, and I see myself as coming into the process midway, because I see the budget process as really an ongoing effort through the whole year. So can I come in and say, fix it this way or this way for this year? I don't frankly know. I don't think so, and I don't think that's the way it should be done, more importantly. What my ideas would be is to look at every budget from the bottom up. Look at when they were built. They're all they were all initiated at a certain point in time, and the community's a different place now. How are the needs being met? What are we buying that still needs to be bought, and what are we perhaps buying that doesn't need to be bought or can be treated differently? I think we should go back to the budget, look at it, start from zero, look at it from the bottom up, look at what we need as a 5-year plan, and then figure out how we're going to meet that hopefully balancing some with revenues, balancing some with which needs are we going to choose to meet and which are we not. It would be unrealistic to think that we're going to meet every need this year, and just balancing which are the most important.
Okay. I asked a similar question to Mr. Bagan as a follow-up to this, basically. One of the biggest items in the budget is staffing, and the issue of contract negotiation, the issue of percentage raises. If that contract negotiation and salary level does not change, and we need to make cuts, essentially, what's your stance on layoffs or staff reductions in town employee numbers?
I think layoffs and cuts are obviously a worst-case scenario, and I think that should be the last thing that we look at. Again, looking where we can get economies of scale otherwise, looking where we can cut back on contracted services, perhaps. I guess again, layoffs would be the last straw, and if that had to happen, I would look to where we could do it by attrition rather than laying off any staff members.
Okay. So tied into that, if cuts may not be the answer, and we need the numbers that we need as far as the budget goes, what's your stance on overrides, either operational or capital overrides?
Well, capital overrides, obviously we know that those are going to be necessary. We can't build a police station or renovate a school out of our operating budget. So obviously where we need new facilities, capital overrides are a necessity. As for operating overrides, again, I think that should be the last straw after we've looked at the budget, after we've looked, aside from staffing, levels of services that are provided in town, how many times the streets are plowed during snowstorms, other things like that, how many times the common is mowed during the summer. Look at that and see if there are any either contractual services or, again, should layoffs be a necessary evil where we can decrease staffing by attrition and perhaps some services that wouldn't be too onerous for the taxpayer to absorb. So I guess that's where I would go first. And override would be a last resort. And if we go for an override, again, I think it would have to be part of a long-term 5-year plan, not something that we're going to override to meet this year's needs, and the next year we're going to find that we're short again. We can't do that. That's not responsible planning.